Hello, my dear friends. Everybody has their pet peeves. I have something that I'm always careful with, but I think other people probably think it's very trivial and maybe not important. But for two reasons, I decided I'm going to speak about it today. One has to do with an experience I had this morning in Manhattan, and the other has to do with a Rashi in this week's Parsha. So before I tell you my pet peeve, first let me tell you the experience I had in Manhattan. I had an appointment in Manhattan. I was coming out of the subway. I was on Lexington Avenue. I had to go to Madison Avenue. I didn't know if Madison is to the right or Madison is to the left. So I waited till somebody passed by who I thought looked sort of on the friendly side that I could approach and ask, "Excuse me, which way is Madison Avenue?" First person I asked, the person didn't even look at me. They didn't even acknowledge me. They just flew right past me like a rocket. Okay, bad luck. Well, there's no luck, such thing as bad luck. Everything's hashgacha, but okay, it didn't work. Let's try the next person. Did the same thing a second time. "Excuse me, which way is Madison Avenue?" The exact same thing happened. I don't know. It's like some kind of new thing. Third time I asked somebody directions, "Which way is Madison Avenue?" The exact same thing happened. Well, I needed to know where to go, so I was persistent. The fourth time I asked somebody with great reluctance. I could see that the person was like offended that I even had the chutzpah to ask them such a question, and begrudgingly they told me Madison Avenue is this way. They were so begrudging, I wasn't sure whether they would told me the opposite just because they were annoyed with me for asking them, or they gave me. Turned out it was accurate directions. Okay, Baruch Hashem, I was able to get to my appointment. Otherwise, I might have been stranded in Manhattan, just asking random people which way is Madison Avenue. So that was the first thing that happened. It reminded me of a story of Rabbi Salanter. I told over the story many times. Rabbi Salanter says that when he was a young man, it was Erev Yom Kippur, and he was on the way to shul, and a Talmud Chacham passed by, and this Talmud Chacham was deeply absorbed in the fact that it was Yom Kippur, and he could see the fear of God on his face, and he was probably thinking about tshuva and things like that. He asked the person an important question. Maybe he asked him what time it was. I don't know. He doesn't say what the question was. And the person did the exact same thing. The person just ignored him. He didn't even say, "I'm too busy, ask somebody else." He just totally ignored him. And you see that Rabbi Salanter, who was a giant in his midos, it obviously bothered him because he retold the story. So it was something that it troubled him. And he said, he wrote a whole thing about it. He said, just because that person is floating around in the upper spheres with the malachim of kedusha, doesn't give him a right not to answer me. I mean, I have a right to ask a question, and he, because of the mitzvah of doing chesed, he has an obligation to answer me. Well, so I was thinking, what was it that bothered Rabbi Yisrael Salanter so much? You know, oftentimes you tell somebody, "I know how you feel," and they say, "What do you mean? You know, somebody broke their leg." And you say, "I know how you feel." They say, "You don't know how I feel. You ever break your leg? How do you know how I feel?" When you experience something that somebody else experienced, then you can say, "I know how you feel." I know how Rabbi Yisrael Salanter felt. I felt it was just okay. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was raising a point. A person can be a big Talmud Chacham and still he's deficient in his midos. But that sensitivity of how come you don't answer me? I know how he felt. So why did it disturb Rabbi Yisrael Salanter? For the same reason why it disturbed me. Because when people do that to you, when they don't answer, they make you feel like you don't exist. You know, giving a person the silent treatment is worse than yelling at somebody. Because when you're giving the silent treatment, it means you don't exist. It's a terrible thing when people sometimes get into arguments, or especially in a marriage. Don't give the other person the silent treatment. That's torture. That's inhumane treatment, because then you're negating the person's identity. So I think that's what troubled Rabbi Shoslan, and that's how I felt also. Like I don't exist. I'm talking to you or to that person, and they didn't even acknowledge that I exist. They didn't even have the, besides the courtesy of telling me, but they didn't even look at me. They didn't. It was obvious that they just, as if I wasn't there. That's if I would have been in front of them, they would have tried to walk through me. So now that's the first story. Now, it got me thinking about how important it is to acknowledge people. My pet peeve is the importance of acknowledging people to an extreme. And okay, I might as well tell you what instead of introducing it so many times. My pet peeve is that in the olden days we used to send letters to people. Used to write a letter by hand or with a pen, or if you knew how to type, you would type a letter. But it always started, "Dear so and so." Two things. First, it was dear, and second of all, it was whoever the person was. Dear Sarah, dear Yankel, dear mommy and daddy, dear whoever it was, my dear friend. But you always started with dear, and you addressed the person who you're talking to. Now, with email and with text messages, I don't know, I never did a statistical study. Maybe I'll do it one day. When I retire and I'll have free time, I'll do a study. But very, very often, people don't forget about saying dear. That's not part of email etiquette. You don't say dear in emails. But the name is significantly left out of the email. No, or the text message or the WhatsApp or whatever. That's the limit of how many things I know how to do. I don't know how to do Instagram, but that's the limit. The people do not mention your name, and to me that's a very important thing. Why don't they? So maybe I'm being super sensitive that I notice it, that somebody sends me an email and they don't say dear Yaakov or dear Rabbi Luban or dear somebody or hello Rabbi Luban. I mean, I don't want you to think that I walk around feeling bad about it all day, but it's a sensitivity. So I said the reason why I was gonna talk about this is my pet peeve. I'm talking about it because first of all, the experience I had with these people in Manhattan reminded me the importance of acknowledging people, and part of acknowledging a person is saying their name. You know, Dale Carnegie wrote a terrific book. I read it when I was very young. How to make friends and influence them. And this is one of the main points in the book, that the thing that people care about the most is their name. That's their identity, and it's very important to use people's names. Now, I'm coming from a different point than Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie is coming from a selfish point because he's talking about how to influence people. I need something from you. So I have to butter you up. So I'm going to call you by your name. I'm coming from a totally different point. I'm talking about dignity of the individual, sensitivity to people's feelings. It's, in my opinion, it's a lack of sensitivity. It's a lack of menschlichkeit not to use a person's name. So here's the second reason why I bring this up, is because of the Rashi in this week's Parsha. Rashi says, "V'haya im Eikev tishmon." Rashi says, "Im ha-mitzvos." These are the mitzvos hakalos she'adam dosh v'akev. The Chumash is talking about if you do these mitzvos, then the God will reward you. So it says, "Im Eikev tishmon." What does Eikev mean? So the plain meaning is Eikev means as a result. A result, if you listen, God will reward you. But Rashi says Eikev. The word Eikev is a heel, means heel in Hebrew. So Rashi says, what's got to do with heels? Rashi says that there's mitzvahs that people trample with their heel. If you do those mitzvahs, then you really get rewarded. So those are the mitzvahs that people think are insignificant. So everybody listening to this could give their examples of things that people are dosh v'akev, something that everybody has their own pet peeves, something that you think is important that people don't do. So I'm sharing, since I have the microphone, I'm sharing with you. Oh, it's a video. I'm sharing with you my thought and that my pet peeve, and that is, I mean, it's not something that I walk around worrying about all the time, but I'm just sharing with you a sensitivity that I think that it's important that when you address somebody in an email or any type of communication, always start with the person's name, and that's something that is people are dosh ba'keva. It's a mitzvah kala. That people are dosh ba'keva. It's a very light mitzvah. On the scale of things, it's not a big mitzvah. It's not going to change the person's life. The person's not going to go off the derech because he didn't use their name, and the person's not going to have a transformation because he did use their name. It's a little blimp, but it certainly qualifies as a mitzvah kala. The Rashi says there's such thing as a mitzvah kala, a light mitzvah that people are dash ba'keva, that people step on. Why are mitzvah kala so important? Why does the Chumash only say you get rewarded for mitzvah kala? Because it's indicative. If a person's careful, a person cares about mitzvos, then a person's careful even about mitzvah kala. And if a person cares about other people's sensitivities, then a person should be careful and mindful of even something that is almost trivial, but it's a level above trivial, because it's also something. It's a lack of dignity to take away a person's name. I wouldn't use the word dehumanizing, but it's the absence of dignifying a person. So that's my message for the Shabbos. I hope that you appreciate my sensitivity. You don't have to worry about insulting me. However you write to me is fine. I don't walk around feeling bad. But I think it's something worth integrating into our way of communicating with others. And thank you for listening, and wish everybody a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos.